All right, let's take a little time travel trip back to the year 2000. Just picture it for a second. The whole Y2K bug panic is just faded away, dial-up internet is still screaming at us through our landlines, and global stock markets are working themselves into an absolute fever over something entirely new. They called it the mobile internet, literally the marriage of the cell phone and web technology. Now, today you and I take for granted that we have a literal supercomputer in our pockets, right? But back then, the business world was placing these multi-billion-dollar bets on a future they couldn't even really picture yet. So, in this explainer, we're going to do a reality check on the early mobile internet boom. We'll look at what the brightest minds of the year 2000 got astonishingly right, and, well, what they got hilariously completely wrong. To really grasp the sheer skepticism of that era, listen to this exact quote from the BBC archive source we're digging into today. At the time, reporters and analysts were looking at these early internet phones and seriously asking this: will they catch on in countries where many of us struggle to program our video recorders? I mean, think about the dramatic irony there. They were literally comparing the learning curve of early mobile data to setting the clock on a VCR. Today, toddlers can navigate a touchscreen before they can even read. But in the year 2000, the general public and a lot of experts viewed accessing the web on a tiny screen as this wildly complex, maybe even entirely unnecessary novelty.
But here's the crazy part: that everyday skepticism absolutely did not match the frenzy of the financial markets. Take a look at this number: $1 billion. In the year 2000, an American startup with just 70 employees was bought out for $1 billion. And their revolutionary product? They literally just did map location tracking. That's it. Today, location tracking is just a background feature running on hundreds of apps on your phone. It's basically free utility. But back then, any technology even loosely tied to the mobile internet had investors throwing just unimaginable sums of cash at it. The gold rush was absolutely on.
Section 1. The Y2K Mobile Gold Rush. So, this wasn't just about small startups cashing in. This was a fundamental reshaping of the entire global business landscape.
The sudden realization that mobile devices could do more than just voice calls drove a massive wave of corporate mergers. Creating a global internet strategy became the ultimate goal, leading to massive deals like Vodafone's record-breaking takeover of the German phone group Mannesmann. Telecom companies were effectively betting the farm on the assumption that consumers would just seamlessly transition to spending massive amounts of money on mobile e-commerce. They envisioned all of us shopping, trading, and doing business on our phones almost overnight. The physical infrastructure was changing hands for billions, and it was all based on a massive guess about human behavior.
Section 2. A Tale of Two Techs, Japan versus Europe. Because, as you'll see, this mobile revolution didn't roll out exactly the same way everywhere. The crucial point here is how drastically different the approach was between East and West. Over in Japan, you had a system called iMode, and it was a phenomenal consumer hit. Our source highlights a Tokyo student in Masakuri Bayashi who explained that with iMode, he just didn't have to go to the bank anymore. He could check statements and send money right from his phone. It was heavily focused on gaming, messaging, and everyday consumer convenience, and it sold an incredible 4 million units in just 1 year. Now contrast that with Europe's approach, specifically in Britain, which focused on a technology called WAP, or Wireless Application Protocol. Developed heavily in tech hubs like Cambridge, WAP was way more corporate. An expert proudly showed off an early WAP device, calling it a mobile phone on steroids, built to do transactions and send email. So where Japan built this incredibly fun consumer playground, Europe basically built a clunky pocket briefcase.
But wait, here is the massive catch in all of this. Even for NTT Docomo, the parent company of iMode and Japan's largest company by stock market value at the time, thanks to this tech, less than 1% of their business actually came from internet data. Less than 1%. As analysts were quick to point out, providing internet access wasn't actually a money spinner yet. Telecom revenue traditionally came from people spending a long time on the network for voice calls. Getting these tiny bits of data here and there for a text or a quick bank check, it simply didn't add up to meaningful revenue. It was a great futuristic gimmick, but the monetization model was completely broken.
Section 3. The Utility Blind Spot. The tech industry was rushing headlong into building these next-generation networks, but they were desperately searching for killer applications to justify the cost. So we have to ask the central question that absolutely plagued businesses back in 2000. As they prepared to spend billions on building 3G networks to make mobile internet as fast as desktop PCs, what did they actually think we were going to do with all that speed? They were trying to predict consumer utility without actually knowing what everyday consumers wanted.
And honestly, their guesses were fascinatingly specific but completely missed the big picture. When researchers in Cambridge were testing new apps, one of their absolute primary use cases was employers keeping track of their employees on maps from back at base. Basically, pure corporate surveillance. Over in Japan, top developers were thrilled about physically connecting a little plug-in camera to the phone just to send a tiny, super pixelated picture. And high-profile bidders envisioned a world where we strictly used phones to buy rail tickets, cinema tickets, and holidays. Notice what's glaringly missing here? Social connection, continuous content feeds. The idea that the phone would become our primary window to our social world was entirely absent. They saw the phone as a transactional vending machine, not a social hub.
Section 4. The mobile video blind spot. If you thought they missed the mark on social media, just wait until you see what they thought about mobile video.
Now, I have to give credit where credit is due. The actual technology was largely on track. Researchers at NTT Docomo's center in Japan were already actively testing mobile TV and video technology way back in 2000. They were hoping to launch it within a single year. They literally brought in journalists and showed them this work in progress, sending TV pictures straight to mobile phone screens. The engineers absolutely knew it was possible, but the business analysts? Oh, they had major doubts about the public utility.
Listen to this deeply skeptical quote from an analyst in the source material. When you want to see a 2-hour movie, wouldn't you want to do that at the comfort of your living room with a big television screen and all that? They fundamentally believed that just because the technology existed, it didn't mean anyone would actually want to consume media on a tiny screen. It was a total failure of imagination. They couldn't foresee our modern streaming culture, the endless TikTok feeds, YouTube rabbit holes, or binge-watching shows on our daily commutes. To them, mobile video was just a neat little trick that no one would ever really want to use.
Section 5. The ultimate gamble. Let's bring this explainer in for a landing and evaluate the overall accuracy of this multi-billion-dollar corporate bet. To really understand the pressure these companies were under, you have to look at the incredibly aggressive timeline investors were betting on. In the UK, the government was just weeks away from auctioning off 5 3G network licenses to 13 massive bidders. In Japan, as we mentioned, they wanted mobile video live within a year. And high-profile bidders were publicly predicting that within just 3 years, 1 billion people, out of a global population of 5 billion at the time, would have mobile phones. They were betting astronomical sums of money that the moment these new 3G networks went live, unlocking fast PC-like speeds, human behavior would just instantly transform worldwide.
So the final verdict is honestly kind of fascinating. As one executive accurately predicted at the time, the phone did indeed become people's life in their top pocket. Their overarching vision was entirely correct. Phones did become the everything device for internet access, purchases, and human connection. But their specific guesses, stuff like employer tracking, clunky WAP browsers, and the immediate timeline for when it would all become highly profitable, totally, hopelessly wrong. And yet, because that core thesis of a mobile-first world ultimately came true, our source notes that those massively expensive early network auctions and investments actually ended up looking incredibly cheap in hindsight. They essentially bought the foundation of the modern world for a fraction of its eventual worth, even if they didn't quite know what they were going to build on it yet.
Which brings us to a crucial point of self-reflection today. When we look back at those analysts in the year 2000 scratching their heads, wondering why on earth anyone would want to watch a video on their phone, it really begs an important question. What modern tech hype are we completely misjudging right now? Whether it's artificial intelligence, virtual reality, or something else entirely, what predictions are we making today that are going to look just as quaint, just as skeptical, and just as foolish in 20 years? Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and I'll leave you to think about that. Keep questioning the future.